Hello, good morning and welcome. It's Wednesday, February the 25th. And I've spent 2 days in the South Manchester suburb where there's a by-election tomorrow and it's simply too close to call. My name is Sam Coates of Sky News.
And I'm Anne McElvoy from Politico. In the general election, Labour won the seat of Gorton and Denton with a 13,000 majority. Reform UK came second and the Greens a close third. In present circumstances, Labour hanging on tomorrow would be a welcome reversal of ill fortune for Keir Starmer, but victory for either Reform or the Greens would be a stunning upset with big consequences for the Prime Minister.
Yeah, you just have to look at all the data around this. A 13,000 majority is not to be sniffed at. Looking back, Anne, this and variations of this seat have been Labour for almost 100 years. In the 2024 general election, Gorton and Denton was ranked the 38th safest seat out of 411 by percentage majority for Labour. So it's quite up there. Also in that general election, Andrew Gwynn, who was first elected for the predecessor seat of Denton and Reddish in 2005 and stood down last month, was one of only 70 Labour MPs elected with over half the votes cast in their constituency. That's how numerically painful losing the seat would be if that comes to pass.
And it would require truly huge swings for Reform or the Greens to take the gold medal there. It would mean a bigger swing for Reform to win than it got in last year's Runcorn by-election. And the Greens have never taken a parliamentary seat in the north of England, worth noting. So an upset is massive as a prospective outcome, but it's also very hard. And Sam, I note that you're not calling the result after 2 days in the constituency, but you can give us a feeling of the mood on the ground as the parties go for the final squeeze before polling. Is Gorton and Denton as excited about all of this as Westminster?
Well, traditionally, Gorton and Denton is actually quite a low turnout seat. In the last general election, it was 12 points lower than the national average. So this isn't a place, I think, that has politics high on the scoreboard. But I did find a constituency that was quite bemused by all of the attention over the last month. I was standing outside an Asda and one lady came up to me and said, her job set by her friends was to take the most photos with cabinet ministers as part of a bet. She was a little disappointed by just getting me and was asking me for tips. At another point in the constituency, I was standing by the side of the road in the Levenshulme district of the constituency, and suddenly I heard a driver shouting my name from behind the wheel in rather an impressive car. I looked up and it was Lucy Powell, Deputy Labour leader, driving through. She's got an event today with Ed Miliband, and I'm told that the Attorney General, Richard Hermer, who's really getting his political chops, is up there as well today for a push in the last few hours. I saw Zach Polanski pound the streets, go door knocking, try to talk around a ex-Tory voter in some of the residential districts, and there were just Reform signs out in force. So I think turnout might be higher than traditionally, but whether or not that's to Labour's benefit or not, we're just going to have to wait and see.
And whether Labour win or lose this one, unusually for a by-election or to an unusual extent, that can be attributed to the Prime Minister, and it's why this count matters so much. People biting their nails back in number 10. The PM and his previous Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, blocked the current Mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnham, we all remember, from submitting his name as a potential candidate. That was just over a month ago, and you only have to look at the results of the last Manchester mayoral vote to see what a popular figure the King of the North is in these parts, suggesting he would have had a better chance than anyone else. Instead, Labour is defending the seat on the back of the reputation of Starmer's government, which is a bit of a stickier wicket right now, and personal reputation, and that feels like a harder task for the party to set itself.
That's right. It's interesting. Andy Burnham does feel like he would have been a standout candidate. People's face kind of lights up at the talk of Burnham, and there was one voter who, just raved about how he would have been the easy choice in an election that now he's struggling at. Look, if I could just tell you a little bit about the constituency, because it feels to me like quite an unusual one. If you look at it on a map And if you watch our film that I've done with Joe Cook, the producer, that's running out all day today on Sky, you'll see one of these maps. Gorton and Denton is a constituency geographically split in half. It's weird. There's a sort of mini bridge between the east and the west ends. In the west, there's Gorton. There's a high density of people from ethnic minority, from the South Asian community, traditionally Labour, but with the Greens fighting hard there to attract that vote with videos in Urdu. Towards Denton, well, it's almost entirely white, far more over 60s in Denton, and you can see quite a lot of reform placards here, although it's not quite an east versus west split. We found voters of all sorts in both bits. But here's the thing, and this is quite important. It may be geographically a constituency of two halves, but the population density is very, very different. And there are twice as many people in the Gorton side of the constituency, where Reform UK might find it slightly harder going, than in the Denton one. So that is quite an important caveat when you're thinking about this. Given Labour won with more than 50% of the vote, it feels like it should be a bit more politically harmonious than it felt on the ground to me. I was simply struck by the anger on the street. Listen to this montage of people I spoke to.
I've never not voted before, ever, but really disillusioned this time.
At first I voted for Labour, but then obviously, things change.
Green.
And why is that?
Because of Palestine.
Labour will win, inshallah. Why not?
So with all that in mind, Playbook reporting this morning, Labour frontbenchers getting orders to hit doors hard across the South Manchester constituency over the next 2 days. But the party's also deploying a big red bus, remember those, to remind voters of the lies, quote unquote, they were told in the Brexit referendum, the 350 million it would gain for the NHS and all of that, part of the tactics to paint Nigel Farage and his clan as untrustworthy and not the solution to their problems. So two very parallel campaigns there. I'm wondering, do they ever encounter each other?
I didn't get any sense of direct clashes, but I do think that there was a friction in this constituency. We were talking to the owners of a dance studio, and they were just saying that unusually a lot of the people that they speak to are quite reticent on this one because they know it's been a more divisive campaign and topic of conversation than normal. I did find Reform voters the most passionate of almost any of the groups, drinking side by side with Green and Labour voters in a pub on Monday night. Immigration for them high up the list, as well as a general sense of Labour mistrustworthiness. But I want to pick up on one thing from a Reform voter, which should ring alarm bells in Downing Street, because I think his remarks have broader resonance. Listen to this.
Get out of the bubble and see what the real world's like. They keep telling us that the cost of living's not going up. Well, everybody knows it is. You only have to go in the supermarket to find that out.
Now, the reason that alarm bells should be ringing is because quite clearly that voter is calling out Keir Starmer's cost of living campaign that he's been running all through 2026. Insofar as it's cut through, insofar as it hasn't been obliterated by all the problems he's been having, Keir Starmer has been boasting about the energy bill help, train fare help, and the like. But voters like that one are having absolutely nothing to do with that, absolutely none of it. Cost of living is going in the wrong direction, and he's very happy to shout about that. It sort of underlines that incredible blunder when we were off, and where the Prime Minister did a tweet a week ago when inflation came down to 3%, and his team, because I presume it wasn't him, took to social media to say lower food and petrol prices are helping ease the pressure on household budgets. Food and petrol prices are not lowering, right? The rate of rise is slowing. And that's what that voter, that now Reform voter, is screaming from the hills. Like, you're in a bubble, you don't really understand real life. You say things are happening, and observably in supermarkets, prices are going up, even though you're banging on about the cost of living getting easier. And that was a very loud and angry point. And I wonder, actually, off the back of that, whether or not the cost of living campaign hasn't ended up doing a little bit more harm than good because it doesn't chime with people's personal experience.
I think there's always a problem with saying to people when the rate of price rises slows down, which is the kind of good news story that you want to put out if you're the Chancellor, or to feed out to MPs at Westminster, but then you take it out to parts of the country where people are really working with very, very skinny budgets. And as you say, I mean, one it was an error, the framing of that tweet, but also I think they think, am I expected to be grateful for this? And I don't feel grateful, because I still feel this immense cost pressure. So there's that huge strategic question about whether Starmer has been right to go on sort of cost of living before he could deliver something a bit more substantial. And a lot of that is out of his control. Anyway, given that that's where we are in the last stage of the campaign, Labour has rolled out ex-Prime Minister and blunderbuss extraordinaire Gordon Brown, with his clunking fist coming into the mix last night, as the Playbook puts it, as he puts child poverty and child poverty relief into the mix as an argument for backing Labour in an op-ed in the Daily Mirror. It feels like the kind of intervention, Sam, that a Labour grandee of Brown's political stripe would make before a general election, or before an absolutely decisive moment, not usually to be reserved in a scrap for a single seat in what should be a Labour stronghold. And it's just worth noting that Labour is now frontally using the two-child benefit cap removal argument as one of its great achievements, even though it was forced into it not that long ago by its own backbenchers, who were kicking back against more stringent ways of approaching welfare reform. Did you notice that Andy Burnham and Keir Starmer apparently had a small rapprochement on the campaign trail? We're seeing Burnham perhaps step back from that very kind of competitive stance vis-a-vis Keir Starmer. I'm being so suspicious here, but I kind of wonder what's in it for Andy down the line.
So one of the things I did notice was that there are no pictures of Andy Burnham and Keir Starmer having their rapprochement. Just as a couple of weeks ago, there were no pictures of Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting having their rapprochement. It's something that Keir Starmer's having to find himself doing quite a lot. Just to rewind to Monday, of course, Andy Burnham giving a superlative statement to the government on Send. So it feels like very consciously the Manchester Metro Mayor isn't being peak troublemaker at the moment. But does that augur well for the Prime Minister, or is he just keeping his powder dry for something a little bit more fruity further down the line? Right, that we should probably move on from the by-election. Just a couple of terms and conditions. A full list of candidates is in the show notes for this podcast. And we ought to mention, we're doing 5 episodes this week, an extra episode on Friday morning after the Gorton and Denton result. We'll record it at the usual time. It'll be in your feeds at the normal time of about 8 a.m, just a touch before on Friday morning, to chew over what has happened. Will it be good news or not for Keir Starmer? Right, I was quite struck. There's not that much talk of Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, in South Manchester over the last couple of days, arguably apart from me on TV doing live hits about it. But there was an extraordinary development on that front yesterday, and a bit of a mystery. Now, when Lord Mandelson was arrested, he was bailed. In other words, there were conditions attached to his arrest. Whereas when Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was arrested, he was just released as part of the investigation. That suggested that there was something we didn't know about the circumstances of that arrest. And lo and behold, it turns out that there was. The original agreement was that Mandelson and the police would have an interview in a couple of weeks' time, and suddenly the police arrested on Monday because they thought he was a flight risk. And you've been digging into all of this. Tell us more.
Yes, I have been dealing with the tangled tale of the conditions of Peter Mandelson's arrest on suspicion of misconduct in public office, and what role a possible flight risk played or didn't. Now, Mandelson has said of his arrest on Monday that doing it in that way, and I think we could see by his face that he was angry. He looked absolutely thunder-faced as he was put into that police car. Now, he says that the manner of that was based on a complete fiction that he was preparing to flee to the British Virgin Islands, hence those dramatic scenes of the police showing up at his London address, rather than him voluntarily attending a police station to face questioning, which he says that his lawyers, Mishcon Dureya, had arranged with the Metropolitan Police, and that should have happened in about 2 weeks' time. So the suggestion here, and Peter Mandelson has made this directly, is that Lord Forsyth, the Lord's Speaker, warned police that Mandelson might flee to the British Virgin Islands. Forsyth, however, via a spokesperson, denies this. And the plot thickens, Sam, because a friend of both Lord Forsyth and Peter Mandelson, who doesn't use the Lord Mandelson anymore, but also in the Lords, tells me overnight, I have no idea why Michael would get involved in all of this. By Peter's account, police cited him as the source of their fear that he was a flight risk, but that was not specific in his lawyer's statements, which is actually a good differentiation here. You know, there's what people understand to have happened, and then there's what their lawyers think is a great idea to complain about, and they can be two different things. Anyway, it's left Peter Mandelson saying publicly and vociferously to his friends behind the scenes that there is something off behind all of this, in his slightly conspiratorial phrasing, especially as he wouldn't have had any more protection in the British Virgin Islands under extradition treaties than he would have in the UK. And I think it does leave the Met with some explaining to do about why such a prominent figure, the Lord Speaker, was cited as the source of that possible rumour about flight risk.
That's right. I'd add one important caveat, though, Anne, which is we only know really the motivation and specifics about the police arrest from Peter Mandelson's side. The police have not put out their case for why they did what they did, which is in no way to cast aspersions. It is simply a point of fact that the set of events that led to the arrest of Peter Mandelson are the ones provided to us either by Peter Mandelson via friends or via his lawyers. My favourite bit, though, was Peter Mandelson telling friends that he would have never gone without his partner, husband Ronaldo, or without the dog, hoping, I think, to appeal to to remaining heartstrings. All of this does introduce a sort of even greater sense of friction between Mandelson and the Metropolitan Police. Mandelson's lawyers saying, we've asked for the Metropolitan Police to provide the evidence relied upon to justify this arrest. Peter Mandelson's overriding priority is to cooperate with the police investigation, as he has done throughout this process, and to clear his name. Just a small factual note, that is the first on-the-record denial that we've had from Peter Mandelson's team since he was arrested. So it is important to say that. But the whole thing, I think, is bad for Downing Street because all of this just gets Peter Mandelson's name back in the news, and it's going to drag on yet further.
Yes, it looks like it won't be till next week at the earliest that we will see the government publish anything of the Mandelson files as promised, and it'll be even longer before we see documents relating to the appointment of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor as a trade envoy for the government. That was back in 2001. The Guardian has an interesting story saying that the former prince inheriting that role from the Duke of Kent, the desire from that came from Buckingham Palace, and that was therefore very hard for anyone in government or in Number 10 at the time to gainsay. You can sense there the class politique desperately trying to shuffle off responsibility for the great idea that wasn't of appointing the then Prince Andrew to the role of trade envoy, as so much likely damaging detail comes to light about that.
Right. We ought to start to wrap it up. A couple of things. Just in fairness, we were talking about the cost of living earlier in the podcast, Anne. The average annual energy bill, the price cap has actually gone down 7%. It's just been announced in the last few moments, 7% in April. That's an actual fall from 1758 to 1641 pounds. So that for an annual bill. So that is actually a drop. We were talking about rises slowing, but Ed Miliband's out on the airwaves as we speak, boasting about that. We will be back tomorrow for Politics at Sam and Anne's. We can't mention the by-election due to Ofcom rules more generally, but we will be back on Friday to do that in spades. So we look forward to joining you twice more this week.
See you tomorrow morning and again Friday.